welcome us from SNRE. Here's Bill Curry, Academic Associate Dean from SNRE, School of Natural Resources and Environment.
Well, thanks, Anna. Yeah, I'm not spending the morning with you folks, unfortunately. I'm just here to sort of welcome the group to SNRE. So this is our state-of-the-art green heating and ventilation system that makes the sounds in this room. So I'm Bill Curry. I'm the Associate Dean at SNRE. Tell you a little bit about myself. I'm an ecosystem scientist. So I study the cycling of carbon and nutrients and the flows of energy and water through ecosystems.
Flow of water, you said?
Really, it's quite normal. It's just certain times of year, certain kinds of weather. These panels bring heat to the room or conduct heat away from the room. There's water that flows through, and just certain changes in pressure and humidity tend to. It's difficult when you're teaching a class. So,
Entertainment.
yeah, really. I can tell you a few words about SNRE. It's a very old school, more than 100 years old. It's very interdisciplinary. We have natural sciences, social sciences, business, law, engineering, economics, policy. We cover a lot of different topics under one roof on a reasonably small faculty, just 43 regular faculty. We have a number of interdisciplinary degrees, including dual degrees. We have 4 dual degrees with law, engineering, and business school. And we just got our 4th one formally approved this year. We now have a dual degree with the Taubman School of Architecture and Urban Planning. So we have students can now do a master's in natural resources and environment and a master's in urban and regional planning and get both master's degrees in 3 years. I think that underscores how SNRE serves as sort of a nexus on campus for environmental issues, because we have a lot of 19 other colleges at the university. Almost everything we do here is duplicated somewhere else, but what we do is bring it together and function as sort of a nexus on campus. We have a lot of graduate students, around 400 master's students and 60 or 70 PhD students. Depending on how you count, because of the dual degrees, you count a person fully or only the year that they're here or whatever. We have an undergraduate program that we co-administer with LSA, the College of Literature, Science, and the Arts. That undergraduate program is growing rapidly as well. There's now about 450 majors and minors. So there's been a lot of interest in environmental issues and sustainability. Our school is really poised to take on these issues of sustainability in a way that's really compelling to students. So there's been a lot of growth. Faculty's been growing a little bit. We have, I think, 5 new faculty hires within the last year. One of whom just received the most prestigious award that a young scientist can receive, the P. Cates Award, which is the President's Award for Scientists and Engineers. Only 80 people in the whole country get this each year. They go to the White House and the Oval Office to receive it. One of our new faculty members, Shelley Miller, just won that award this year for work on she's studying switchgrass development as a biofuel in the southeastern United States. So we're in the middle of the dean search. Rosina Beerbaum has been our dean for 10 years now, and there's a 10-year term limit, so she's stepping down. And hopefully in September we will have a new dean to take the helm. We just had 4 candidates come through in the last 2 weeks, so it's been a lot of chaos at SNRE to have 4 dean candidates go through the school during the last 2 weeks of the academic year. And I'll stop there unless there's any other questions I can answer. Anything specific about the school people would like to know?
Well, you've been adding geographers, I understand.
Josh Newman's one of our new hires, and he's a geographer, right? Yeah.
Just John and Cindy are all geographers.
Okay, excellent.
So it's nice to know that more on campus.
Yeah.
Well, thank you, Bill.
All right. Thanks, Sandy. Have a good time, folks.
Thanks for coming. All right, well, again, happy Google Earth Day, if you weren't here when I said it before. And next up is Matt, who's going to tell us about mapping in Ann Arbor and municipal applications that have been going on recently, since last year or whenever.
Let me know. I assume everyone can hear me. So, just a little bit of background. The city reorganized. We used to have 14 departments. Now we have 4 service areas. Financial services, safety services, public services is the group I'm in, and then community services. Public services brought together kind of water, wastewater, all the infrastructure. And they also created a group called systems planning to try and bring together all the major disciplines. So I'm now in a group that has an environmental person, energy, stormwater, floodplain, recycling, solid waste, composting, transportation, mostly non-motorized, water quality, deals with stormwater permits, but kind of total water quality management. We have a new urban forester, a dedicated person for GIS with probably 3 or 4 interns full-time working on a variety of spatial projects. Let's see, who else am I forgetting? A full-time engineer to work on our capital improvements program. A full-time planner who does nothing, well, who mostly focuses on the relationship between the university and the city and the university building projects, because the university doesn't really have to plan through the city, and it's just a good way for us to coordinate use of infrastructure. So it really ends up being kind of a sustainability shop that brings all these disciplines together in one place. So it's it's been kind of evolving over the last 5 years, and I'm in that group now. So today I'm going to quickly run through a number of ways that we're using mapping. The folks who do a lot of this couldn't come because it was Good Friday. Scott Harrod in our planning group, we have a full-time planner, GIS person there. Kevin Iyer is in our IT group, and we've been doing a lot of work with eTrackIt as a way to manage permits and then integrate that with a spatial element on the web. These are just some screenshots Scott gave me of a 3D model that he has built off the building footprints and then extruded them up based on the building heights. And originally we had height data, I think, in the assessor's office, but now we have LiDAR data that's provided an average building height. And so to go back to what Sandy had worked on 10 years ago, this is kind of the chunky model, because Sandy had developed this in an earlier phase. This is all, we use ArcGIS, ArcMap, and we also have a brand new tree inventory with 50,000 street trees, planting sites, stumps, and so he's taken the street layer and just overlaid that, and then he's looking at this in 3D. This is overlooking the Broadway Bridge, looking back into town. So we also have a streetlight layer, which he's turned on there, and just put in a streetlight icon. This is looking at the U of M campus. I think that's the diag, with the stormwater infrastructure overlaid on it. So we have very good spatial data on stormwater, sanitary, and water. We don't give that data out. But this is a way to display it, and we also have a Z dimension on it, so you could look underneath and see where these are underground. This is our kind of move to open data, so it's a data catalog at a2gov.org/data. Sandy, can you give me a 5-minute warning?
You got plenty of time.
Okay. So this is just a screenshot. If you go there, there's a number of data sets. You can see that you can get most of them in either a KML, KMZ file, or the actual shape file. This, I just, on my computer at work, it's a big file. It's kind of slow on my computer. But these are all the street trees in the city. So you can zoom into the one by your house and find out what its species is, what its diameter at breast height is, and what kind of condition we think it's in. So I just picked a tree on Huron Parkway. And so white oak, it's got an address, it's high priority to prune it, current condition is poor, diameter, and then they give it a height range. And it's with these data that we're starting to build an urban forestry management plan. So now you can start planning, looking at the trees as an asset just like the water system. When was it put in? What's its expected life? If you go to our, we have a State of the Environment report, a2gov.org/SOE. There's 3 indicators for trees, and 1 is species diversity. With this inventory, we now know we're about 40% maple. We will not be planting another maple anytime soon in the city. It makes residents really upset because they all want, and some of the maples aren't good maples. They're Norway maples that probably ought to go anyway. But it now gives us, we can look spatially and say, where are there too many maples concentrated? How do we diversify that population and diversify it across the city? We lost 15,000 ash trees with emerald ash borer. And what you found was some neighborhoods did fine. They lost trees, but there was a fair diversity, and so the canopy in the neighborhood still looks fairly robust. Some of the newer neighborhoods that went in on the northeast side of town, they just planted ash, and so those neighborhoods were decimated for trees. So we have a perfect example, and the next time a critter comes, if it's a maple critter, we're going to be in trouble in certain neighborhoods. So again, it just creates a good planning tool. I'll show you a little bit of some of.
Could I just
Yeah.
ask you a question about the trees?
Absolutely.
Do you have a entry for seasonal color and bloom?
I don't think that's in the database.
Because that's a feature of Ann Arbor.
Right.
I mean, the Bradford pears in the spring, you know, that's a spectacular display. And then there are some streets where there's fall color,
Uh-huh.
and they're crab apples still, even though I know there's.
Well, and you could probably automate that with, if you know, you create a data set that says these flower or these change color in the fall, and these are the predominant colors. And then you could literally paint the city then with.
Well, it'd be great if you did that, because that's really a feature. And from planting a tree, like the Kentucky coffee tree, that is very late to leaf out and looks terrible in the springtime, you know, you might want to make a different choice.
Well,
based
you know,
on those characteristics.
you live in town, right?
Yeah.
Okay. Remind me that we're doing the urban forestry management plan process is starting right now.
Okay.
So it's something that it's a perfect time to make that comment.
Great.
I will share it with the city forester, or our urban forestry and natural resource planner.
Okay.
But feel free to email me or Carrie Gray, our forester, and that's a great comment. And it's easy to do, again, with this data set.
Well, while you're there, how do you decide on the condition of a tree?
I don't.
What makes a tree poor? 50% dead? Or?
There's got to be a criteria, and I'm not sure. It's I can double check. You know, these are foresters that were hired by the city to literally walk the streets and do all these.
How many grades are there? Poor.
I think it's poor, fair, and good. I think it's just 3 grades. This I wanted to show you, and sorry Google, this is a Microsoft product they bump out to. E-Track-It is our electronic permit tracking program at the city. This is all available on the web. So I just decided to take a look at 601 Forest. It's a new development that's going in where Village Corner was, right on South U and Forest. Type in 601 Forest. The list comes up down here. Just click on it. You can look at the project info, various contacts, fees, inspections, reviews. I just clicked on the map view, and this is what came up. So it's again trying to link some of the data that we have out to other maps. You can also use this to look at housing inspections, and this is one of the things we're trying to green the rental housing in Ann Arbor, and it's a very complicated system because it's not clear whose job it should be to do that, because the city doesn't really gain by making housing more efficient. You know, it's not like someone's paying us money. The landlords don't necessarily always have incentives because the students often pay the utilities. But we're starting to think about adding energy efficiency into some of the housing inspections, and then making that available on the web through E-Track-It. So if you were a student here and you want to know whether there have been any violations in the rental property you're looking at, that should all be available on the web now. Right now, I just don't think it's as easy to get to, and I think that's the direction we're going to go is, you know, maybe that's one of those we need an app for that, to reach out and get all these data. This is something we started a while ago, and it's not perfect, but right on the front page is an area you click for My Property. You type in your address down in this area, click Validate, it just checks whether it's an actual Ann Arbor address. This is My House. So this is the solar potential tab. So a group of grad students went through spatial maps of the city, took a look at the size of the roof, whether there were trees around it, what the orientation was, and rated the solar potential. So mine's fair because it's tilted, it doesn't face due south, but it's fairly big. It gives me a sense for 4 to 8 kilowatts. So it's just something that's available to every resident as part of this, and especially as we start to think about more renewables in the city. This is our stormwater system. This is interesting. I think we started a stormwater utility, and if you're going to have a utility, you have to, people need to be able to use more or less of it. You know, it can't just be, if you're just charging a flat rate, it's a tax, it's not a utility. So we need to make sure we were charging people appropriately. So the design is, this is near infrared flyover data, not thermal, but what it does is measure what parts of the city are photosynthesizing. So we use that as a proxy for any of these red areas are hard surfaces. Water will not go through, it's impervious. So we charge you for the square footage of impervious surface. See, I've got a house on a hill with no lawn, so it's mostly house. And there's decks over here. We have 09 data and 06 data, so now we can actually compare the change in impervious surface. But this is a data set that's available in the city now, and because we know all the red are hard surfaces, now when you think about where do you want to plant new trees, you can think about, I'd like to, you know, preferentially plant trees over hard spaces because I'll get the additional stormwater benefit, and your average tree will hold 1/4 of an inch of rain. Citizen requests, type in an address, potholes, didn't pick up my trash, things like that. Again, it's got a mapping element, it's not slick, you can't just like double click on the space and up pops the window, but we're starting to move that way. This is a green energy map where one of our, he was an intern at the time, he's now the energy programs manager. We figured out a way to get a Google map on the page, and then he figured out the programming So if you want to look at who's got solar installations, geothermal, things like that, that's all available off the city's energy page. And I think this is the last one. Parks capital improvement projects. So there's a map of the city with a little icon showing where we've got planned projects. And again, taking advantage of Google's clickable map system, I was just clicking on the one over by Getty's Gallup Park, and it gives you a little short summary of what we're planning to do there. So unfortunately right now you have to go to lots of different places to get into these maps. It's not like there's one GIS space and you can turn layers on and off. The county has some of that. I think we're moving in that direction, just not there yet. So I think that's, oh, last one, zoning maps. I just found this, I hadn't used this before, but it's a way that there's official zoning maps of the city. And this is a Google Maps version where you click on it, click on the PDF, and then you get the PDF of the zoning map that you want. So I'll stop and answer any questions. Thank you.
Matt?
Yeah?
Wednesday, Google announced Google Earth Builder, which lets enterprises, companies, governments create their own layers as if they have their own version of Google Earth. So all your GIS stuff can be in one place in the cloud. So since Ann Arbor's kind of moving in this direction, that's something you guys maybe should look into.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I'll talk to Kevin Iyer. You know, the IT group is really interested in, again, how do we get as much of our data out there? It's all public anyway. You know, if you go to the data site, you can pull up the Excel spreadsheet of every credit card charged that month by city employees. You know, it's because people have been FOIAing it. They want to know who's spending what and where, and so it's just like, let's just put it out there, and you know, it's public anyway. But that's, you know, this is the thing where it's good to get these groups together and we can figure out, I wouldn't have known that.
Anyone else?
The other thing, when you're talking about the tree layer and then the solar potential, I mean, there's a correlation there. Like certain times of the year, maybe not, right?
Right. Yeah, and that's probably looking at it, I don't know whether the students looked at it with leap on or leap off flyover data.
Yeah.
And that it's one of those things we haven't dealt with yet, but there are solar rights ordinances in communities where if you put up solar, how do you make sure your neighbor's not planting a tree that in 5 years is going to cover up your,
Interesting. Yeah.
you know. So it's a dilemma, but
Do you have the tree data for the university properties, like you have for the urban forest?
only to the extent those trees are on city streets. The urban forestry data we have is just street trees, so just the trees between the sidewalk and the street. And a few of the ones that are in urban parks that people walk by. So I guess the answer is no, I don't have these trees right in front of Dana. What we do have on a different project is we have a urban forestry canopy analysis. So we actually have had a firm come in, and we're 32% canopied is where we are right now, and American Forestry thinks better to be at about 40%. So I think that's part of this urban forestry planning process. Coming up with a plan is coming up with a goal. How canopied do we want to be, and then how do we get there? That's another spatial data set, and this flyover data and analysis that we have that's available. It's something we've been trying to figure out where we need a grad student, is how to take a bunch of this data that we have, pull it together, and kind of create the new natural features map for the city. based on all these data sets.
The other thing that I just discovered last night is that Google 6 has a layer for trees. Now, somebody has to populate that there. But I'm thinking that with remote sensing, if they can determine certain crops with infrared, you could probably determine certain kinds of trees that same way and have a lot of that automatically done. So they have models for a few dozen types of trees. So if you know what type of tree it is, it will put a representation in 3D and
Right there.
on the 3D, you know, when you do like 3D buildings, there's like a tree layer that does that too, so you can turn on the trees. So that's, I mean, you already have the database for the city trees. It's just a matter of getting the private trees.
Right. And when you look at the city tree database, I mean, it looks like it fills up that map, but 50,000 sounds like a lot of trees, but when you go down and focus in and you realize how many trees there are and how few of them are actually our street trees, so much of the natural features in the city are actually on private property. And that's kind of another direction we're heading, is how to start telling neighborhoods that story about, you know, your backyards actually are a pretty incredible habitat corridor, and this is the way to manage it. If you want it to look this way, you have to let the baby oaks grow up and not just mow it all down. And again, there's some interesting planning tools we can create out of this.
So there are about 35,000 residential parcels in the city. I seem to recall that number, but I don't know. But if that's the case, then that'd be about 1.5 street trees per
Per,
residence,
probably about right.
which isn't too many. But
Well, again, it's all relative, you know, we've got a lot more street trees than most places, and that's where this planning effort comes from.
I was thinking in terms of relation, probably most people have more than 1.5 trees in their backyards.
Oh, absolutely, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, that's, the city is just from the sidewalk to the street, right, that strip.
Right,
So there's gonna be a lot more trees in the people's yards.
yeah. Okay,
Okay, thank you.
next.